to Egypt because 6 people have died. 2 of them children after a tourist submarine carrying dozens of Russian visitors sank off Egypt's Red Sea coast. It happened off the resort of Hurghada during an underwater excursion to see coral reefs more. Then 29 people were rescued. Some are said to be in a critical condition. In hospital, an investigation is underway to determine the cause of the accident. Let's get more from our Egypt correspondent, S. We don't know yet what exactly happened and caused this submarine to sink. But according to local sources, we understand that rescan search operations are still underway of the Red Sea coast. And the question is now, why these incidents keep happening quite frequently off the Red Sea coast. I remember last November I went to the city of Hurghada to cover another tragedy, when another boat has sunk off the coast of an Egypt Red Sea resort. There were more than 40 tourists on board at the time. The authorities back then blamed it on a huge wave that hit the boat and caused it to capsize. But the BBC has spoken to survivors from this tragedy, and they said that the authorities were just trying to cover it up. So frequency of these tragedies, they raised a lot of questions about the security measures employed by the local authorities, especially that these sea excursions, they attract a lot of tourists. The Red Sea Resort is a very popular tourist destination. Now is a prime time for the tourist season. The weather is sunny, magnificent, marine life, and it's a very flourishing season. But this tragedy now will deal a very, very heavy blow to the tourism industry, which is a lifeline to the Egyptian economy, in fact. And we have also to note that tourism industry is highly dependent on Russian tourists, and according to the Russian embassy in Cairo, the submarine had 45 tourists on board. All of them were Russians. Well, that was S. Let's speak to Dr. Simon Boxo, Senior Lecturer of Oceanography at the University of Southampton. Thank you, Simon, for joining us here on the program. What are the types of things that can go wrong on a submarine like this, especially that it was just outside of the port, wasn't it? It had just left. And these submarines will usually go under sort of diesel engine or engines to get them to site, and then they'll switch to electric because obviously the diesel won't work underwater. So it was heading out towards it, sort of dive site. There are probably 20 or 30 of these submarines around the world doing tourist trips. They've got a very good safety record thus far. This company, Sinbad, operate 2 of these submarines. They've been done doing it for a few years now without incident. You know, I've seen reports now online of people saying that, unlike the Sea Story incident where many people had complained about the safety issues and safety on board, people have been sort of extorting the virtues of these particular submarines. So until we know what happened, it is speculation had someone left the hatch open. That may sound like a stupid statement, but things do happen. There's no sea of such, there's no waves as such. It was a flat cal sea out there, so I think, we'll have to wait until the initial stories come out from the people who survived. Sure, tell me a little more then about the design of these types of submarines. You mentioned how many of them are worldwide, but what sort of depths are they designed to actually go down to? This particular one is rated to 75 mers. Now, what's interesting is the website talks about the company's website talk about this as being a Finnish-engineered submarine. I'm not quite sure what Finnish-engineered means. Is it made in Finland? If it is, it's made to very, very high standard. So we're not sure when it was built, where it was built. But it's difficult to know why this particular one floundered the way it has done in terms of emergencies on a tourist submarine. What would passengers have had available to them? Would they have, for example, things like oxygen life belts, that sort of thing? Or does that not exist? Yes, they would had oxygen masks, which would come down in case the oxygen supply got cut off. So in the event that the vessel got stranded on the sea floor for a bit, then they'd have oxygen to help them. It would have been operating in its design to go down to, for tourists, about 25 meters, and I understand this particular case. They even have divers alongside to sort of feed the fish and to sort of, I suppose, enhance the tourist experience. They also would have had life jackets, but of course you don't want to put those life jackets on until you actually get out of the vessel, because it's a bit like an aircraft, very narrow sort of openings or 2 openings to get out the vessel itself. And that'll be where the problem comes. If you've got 45 people scrambling to get out through 2 narrow hatches, then you can start to understand the size of the problem in evacuating a submarine like this. So it is very difficult potentially to have an evacuation. Presumably there would be no light potentially within the vessel. If there has been some sort of emergency, so a very, very difficult an environment to get people out quickly, well, I mean, you would have had light, natural light anyway. So I mean, the water they were working was crystal clear and it was daytime, bright sunshine. So there would have been plenty of light just naturally coming through the sea. There'd be no point in going down there if that wasn't the case. So light wouldn't have been a problem. It would have been literally a question of being able to evacuate the vessel quickly. An essay safely, you touched on safety record just generally for tourists and tourist vessels. There is obviously a huge amount to learn here in any investigation, but what are the areas that you would be looking in terms of basic safety issues in a country like this? And what are the things that we don't know? We don't know what the incident was. Did it sink? Did it capsize? So until we know that, we can't go to the next day. But certainly, one needs to check that the crew were fully qualified. I'm sure they were. But we need to check that we also need to check when the last safety inspection was on the submarine. And did it meet all of the Egyptian standards? And Egypt insists it has. Very high standards. We know from experience from liverboard, dive vessels that those standards aren't always met. Doctor, thanks so much for taking time to speak to us. Good to talk to you.